Hello, my name's Ron Hall. This will be my fourth video discussing John Hagee's brand spanking new self-discovered prophecy called the Four Coming Blood Moons. He rolled this out at the beginning of this year, and you can go watch this on YouTube. That's not entirely correct. He says he gives credit to Moshe Pinchuk, Rabbi Moshe Pinchuk, Rabbi David Altman, Rabbi Scheinberg from San Antonio, Texas, and also he gives credit to Mark Biltz for helping him work all this stuff out. But for the most part, John Hagee presents this as prophecy that you've never heard before. And you're probably wondering why would I feel compelled to make yet a fourth video on this subject, and the reason why is actually quite simple. It's because the prior videos I was pointing out that John Hagee was attaching these astrological event to the Gog-Magog war. I knew from studying Hagee and following him for years and reading his prophecy material that he has always attributed that event to at least a mid-trib. You can go back and look at some of my earlier videos that I show you example after example where he tells his church that they will be gone 3.5 years before the Gog-Magog war, but yet now he's saying that these four blood moons that are going to start next year, April the 15th, 2014, and just spanning 18 months, that this is the Gog-Magog war, which if you just do simple math, the church, according to him, should have been gone several years ago. But and I wanted to consolidate this into a fourth video because I had missed the most obvious thing is that he completely, and let me back up, before this video's over, I will have presented with John Hagee's material absolute slam dunk irrefutable proof that if he is telling the truth, if he's correct on these four blood moons the way he presents it now, attaching it to the verses that he does, then he will have single-handedly destroyed his premillennial eschatology. And by that, what I mean is he leaves no time for a rapture. There's no chance of a rapture happening based on what he's saying now. If he's correct now, you can kiss your rapture goodbye, Cornerstone Church, because quite frankly there's not enough, you don't have enough time. And the reason being is you're probably wondering about the chart I have behind me. This chart is just a blown up page of, I think it's Roman numeral 24 in his prophecy Bible. As you will see right there where I put the blood moon I put that on there. You've got two arrows there. This one on the left, that's right there. He's got part of Matthew. I think it's chapter 24, verse 4 through 26. He has, where does he have that? In the tribulation. He's got it in the tribulation. The church has been raptured according to him back here. But what really should startle you is where he's got one of his centerpieces for his four coming blood moons. He's got Matthew 24, 27 through 30 right here at where? The second coming. I mean, okay, and you're going to see in here in just a minute clips where he tells his church, he says, will you write in your Bibles at Matthew 24:14, church raptured here, because I want you to remember this always. But if you write it there, and if it happens, how are you gonna see Matthew 24:29, one of his main blood moon verses? He attributes that verse to these coming blood moons starting next year. He attributes Mark chapter 13 verse 24 to this happening next year. He attributes Luke chapter 21, 25. All of it is from the Olivet Discourse, where Jesus is predicting this astrological event to happen right prior to the second coming, his second coming. You will see that in just a moment from John Hagee's own prophecy Bible, where he puts it, is right at the second coming. But now he's saying this is happening next year. So mathematically, you should have been secretly sucked off the earth at least probably 5 or 6 years ago. You do the math. His centerpiece for all this is Joel chapter 2 verse 30 and 31. He says that is the fulfillment coming up next year, which he also reiterates through Peter's words on the day of Pentecost. He says that chapter 2 verse 20 and 21, where Peter in the book of Acts, where he's talking about Joel, the prophecy. He's saying all of that is tied up with these moons next year. So you can kiss your rapture goodbye. I didn't do it. John Hagee did it. I didn't hold a gun to John Hagee's head. As far as I know, nobody did. Who knows? And made him roll this out. But mathematically, it cannot. He's either been wrong for 40 plus years, and he's right now, or he's been right for 40 plus years, and he's wrong now, or there's a distinct possibility he's full of crap all along, and I tend to lean towards the latter. I feel like that just none of this holds water. I don't believe any of this stuff, but I know that John Hagee believes it, and I know that millions on this planet follow him, and he's quite frankly turned the gospel of Jesus Christ into a racist, bigoted, hateful, angry religion that you cannot get from the words of Jesus Christ. He turns it into a racist. He leads you to believe that God loves the Jews more than he does anybody else, which if you just call time out right there, that makes God a racist by any definition. So I said it, that if God is the way John Hagee depicts him and presents him, well, then God's a racist. Let's just call God what he is. He's a racist. I, on the other hand, don't believe that. I believe that God loves everybody the same, but that's one of the biggest reasons why I even do this, is because I think that people need to consider what John Hagee teaches, because he's wrong here on one way or the other. He's wrong for 40 plus years, and he's right now, or he's right now or wrong now. And I even get this stuff confused. But either way, he's wrong, which should tell you that he's probably wrong on a whole lot of stuff that he teaches. But here later in the video, we're going to get into this little jewel right here, brand spanking new off the press, his book to go along with his sermons. I'm sure that there's probably going to be a lunchbox, backpack, a mini-series. I don't know what's in store for this blood moon, but they're going to have to cram it in pretty doggone quick, because you only got 6 months to go, and then according to John Hagee, we're at the second coming of Christ. And I'm going to use to prove that he destroys his rapture, I'm going to use what I consider the code breaker of John Hagee eschatology. It's his own prophecy Bible. So far, I've given you zero opinion of mine. What you're going to see is you're going to see me present Hagee here, think about it, and then try to work it out to where you can make both Hagees, you can reconcile it. I would make the argument you cannot. So, let's start this thing off with some historical Hagee from just a couple of years ago, letting you know about the rapture, the timing of it, and then we're going to go into his prophecy Bible, I'm going to show you some, probably 20 different places where he attributes these key verses, that Joel 2:30 and 31, and Matthew 24:29, Mark 13:24. You're going to hear these verses over and over because it matters. Location, location, location. Where he puts these in conjunction with the supposed 7-year tribulation, he's always put these things, in the tribulation. Now he's saying it's next year. And guess what? If you're watching this video, you're still here. You haven't been secretly sucked off the earth yet. So let's get a little John Hagee and kick off your shoes. Get yourself some popcorn, relax. If you're a Hagee church member, this is not going to be easy for you. So I'm just warning you, if you're faint of heart, you might want to take aspirin. If you're a drinking person, you may want to sling down a beer or two. So let's watch John Hagee and we'll move on with this.
And God is bringing back these tribes to Israel right now. The next thing that's going to happen is right here, is the rapture of the church, in which the church of Jesus Christ shall instantly, suddenly be snatched off of this earth in the twinkling of an eye. If while I'm teaching this, I suddenly disappear, check your tube. I may be gone. Right on the other side, at the very top, the judgment seat of Christ. Every believer is going to go to heaven and is going to answer to the Lord for everything you did in this life. For everything you've done in this life. You're going to answer to God for the gap that exists between where you are and where you could have been had you done what God asked you to do. And then John opens the book, the 7 seals, the 7 trumpets, and the 7 bowls. And he begins to say in these 7 seals, he begins to portray the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. And he presents them one at a time to the church. First, the white horse, which is the Antichrist who is coming. Many teachers present this as Christ. This is not Christ. This guy on the white horse here. Christ is coming on a white horse in Revelation 19 over here to rule and reign the earth. The church is gone. The church is here. The church is not going through this. Revelation 2 and 3 has the church going up. In chapter 4, God says to John, let me show you what's coming. The church is never mentioned again until we get over here to the marriage supper of the Lamb. You poor Christians that are running around, read the book of Revelation. The church is not going through the tribulation. Not 1 second. We're leaving here. Go to these 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. The white horse is the Antichrist. The red horse represents that 2/3 of the world is going to be killed in bloody warfare. The black horse is the horse of famine. To sit together in heavenly places, who are wearing crowns and wearing robes, is the church. So in Revelation 4, the church is where? In heaven. Now comes Revelation 6, where the tribulation begins and the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse make their appearance. The Antichrist is on the white horse conquering the world. The red horse of war comes, the black horse of famine then comes, the pale horse of death comes, and God gives to them the power to take from the earth 1/4 of the population of planet Earth. Think about that. 1/4 of humanity is going to die in a period of 7 years. In America, that would be 76.5 million people. And I believe that's going to happen. Where is the church? In heaven. Get that in your mind. We are seated, we are robed, we are crowned, we are victorious, we are shouting on the hills of glory. We've got a mansion just over the hilltop. Pray up, pack up, we're going up in the twinkling of an eye. Give the Lord a shout of praise in the house of God. Now go back to Matthew 24:15, where the tribulation begins, and we have a dramatic change in the text here. Jesus says to his disciples as he's talking on the Mount of Olives, therefore when you see the abomination of desolation, That's an important phrase, spoken of by Daniel the prophet standing in the holy place. That's a very important summary. And so does the Word of God. Matthew 24:15 talks about the holy place, the abomination of desolation in the holy place. Where is that? That's the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, Israel. The abomination of desolation in Matthew 24:15 is when the Antichrist sets up his image and demands that the world worship him in the city of Jerusalem, and that's going to happen. The first abomination of desolation in the book of Daniel, spoken of here, happened in 170 BC. That's when Antiochus Epiphanes attacked Jerusalem. He killed 100,000 Jews. He offered the blood of a swine upon the altar in the temple that was holy to the Jewish people. He set up an image of Jupiter to be worshipped on the Temple Mount. When the Antichrist sets up his image to be worshipped in Jerusalem in the future, God says, look out. My judgment and my wrath is getting ready to be unleashed. Let me remind you, where is the church? The church is in heaven. Write about Matthew 24:14. Would you write across that verse, church is raptured here? Because I want you to remember it always.
Okay, that wasn't too painful. Before we go any farther, I just want to point out to the Hagee folks, just mostly for their benefit, what did your pastor just say? He said that the tribulation begins at Matthew 24:15, correct? I didn't say it, John said it. It starts right there with the abomination of desolation, the Antichrist, okay? He even tells you guys to write in your Bibles, the church raptured here, right at Matthew 24:14, and I did that in my Bible, my John Hagee Prophecy Bible. So, what I wanted to point out to you is if the tribulation starts at Matthew 24:15, then you're not going to be here, right? You've secretly been sucked off the earth, right? Correct? Okay. How is it that you're going to see, according to John now, how are you going to see Matthew 24:29, that blood moon verse of his, one of the staples, one of the centerpieces of his blood moon that you're going to hear in just a few minutes? How are you going to see that? Is Jesus going to suck you off the earth, bring you back, let you see the moons, and then take you back, and then bring you back for the second coming? How's that going to work? That's just 6 months from now. It's October the 15th today. April the 15th is when this starts happening, the blood moons. Okay? How is it that you're going to see this 6 months from now? He even tells you later in this video that you might see this, but then again, you may be raptured, you may not, you may see this and then be taken after. He's taught you that this is second coming verse. This is 7 years after the rapture is the blood moon, according to what he's taught in this book right here that we're going to start going through. And I'm going to show you, hopefully some of the folks from Cornerstone have this. They ought to be looking at it and thinking, how does this mathematically stack up to the blood moons? Fact of the matter is, it doesn't. He said in that first clip there, the church will see none of this great tribulation. You do the math. He's totally destroyed if he's correct now, and this is the Gog-Magog war, if this is the blood moons of Joel 2:30 and 31, he's completely eliminated any possibility of a rapture taking place and then cramming 7 years in, a 7-year tribulation in, because so that it could coincide with the second coming that's happening next year. Okay, let's start in here. We're going to take a little time, get a baseline on John Hagee's 40 plus years of teaching, and then we'll shift gears after that and listen to some of his London teaching on the blood moons from this year, and then we're going to hear some of his San Antonio, and then we're going to later get into his blood moon book, his brand spanking new prophecy discovery put in book form. So let's get on with this. This is his prophecy Bible.
Alright, we're going to hit the ground running here on Roman numeral 15 of his prophecy Bible. He has an article called Events of the End Times, and he's got this broken off into sections: the introduction, then he goes to the last days, he's got a section to for the rapture, and then he gets to what you're looking at right here is where the article starts, the tribulation. And I just wanted to point out what you're looking here. Sometime after the rapture, a 7-year period will begin, which is called the tribulation. So that's the section. We're going to look at a couple of these screenshots, these shots of his Bible, and jumping over to on the same page of the article, starting the part of the tribulation, in the very next column at the bottom we have him outlining. He's got from Matthew 24:10 and 12. This is under a section. It says this: we see that in the tribulation many will. This whole article ought to give pause to anybody that goes to Cornerstone Church. He's got Matthew 24. He just told us earlier in this video to write in Matthew 24:14 that the church rapture here, but now he's got 10 and 12 saying that this is part of the tribulation. Flipping over to the very next page along the same lines of what he's talking about in Matthew 24, he has this, and I'm pointing towards it. Matthew 24 records that in the first half of the tribulation. Matthew 24, as you'll hear later in this video, he views Matthew 24, the Olivet Discourse, he calls it, and he even has a section in his new book called The Spine of Prophecy. And he outlines, he teaches that the Olivet Discourse is the spine of prophecy. He tells you to write in your Bible at Matthew 14 that the church is raptured here. The church will go through no part of the tribulation, but right here he says Matthew 24 records that in the first half of the tribulation. Which is it? Which is it, John? Look right here, just like one paragraph under what I just showed you. He has this. He's got, pay attention here, folks. He's got right here in black and white, at the midway point in the tribulation, Israel will be attacked. Who will they be attacked by? Look right under there. Gog of the land of Magog, the prince of Rosh, Meshech, Tubal. This is midpoint now in his prophecy Bible. He's taught that the Gog-Magog war will take place in the midpoint of the tribulation. But now he's saying that these blood moons that are supposed to start next year, this is the Gog-Magog war. He says that in his first sermon. Jumping over to the very next column along the same lines with this Gog-Magog, we have a neat little nugget there too. Over in the very next column we have, he's listing these countries that are going to come against Israel in this Gog-Magog war. As you can see, we've got Persia, Ethiopia, Put, which is Libya. Look what he says here. Now this is in his prophecy Bible. He has Gomer. Who's Gomer? In this new stuff that he's rolled out, he says Gomer is Germany, which is in Europe. Right? He's always taught, look what he puts right here, Gomer, Eastern Asia Minor in modern day Turkey, although they may have migrated from territory that now belongs to the countries of former Russia. Yada yada yada. The point is he just arbitrarily just flips stuff upside down, and I don't know why most people don't catch this stuff, but this is, let me reiterate, this is in an article entitled Events of the End Times. This reference that you're looking at right here is on Roman numeral. We haven't even got into the charts, and on Roman numeral 18, he's already showing you that the Gog-Magog war is supposed to been fought in the middle of the tribulation. So we're going to just move on quickly. Okay, just probably less than 4 inches away in the same column under the Gomer reference, we have this right here. And for anybody that goes to Cornerstone Church, this one ought to make you this one ought to make you crap your pants, because he's saying that Joel 2:30 and 31, he's got this in the mid-trib here. This is his recent prophecy Bible. He's got Joel 2:30 and 31, and let me read. You're seeing this. It says, "The wonders which God will show in the heavens and the earth are blood, fire, pillars of smoke." Get this: "The sun shall be turned into darkness, and the moon shall be turned into blood." What, doesn't that sound familiar? Of course it does, because he says this reference here, Acts 2, Matthew 24:29, and Mark 13:24. All these blood moons are tied to events not 10 years from now, but next year, folks, starting in April of next year. It's going to span over 18 months. So that's the point. You're going to see in his videos where he ties these Matthew 24:29 and Mark 13:24 references to this, which by his own admission, he says that this Joel is the mid-trib. It's mid-tribulation. He leads right straight from there to the very next page, top of the next column. He says, immediately before Jesus sets foot on earth, and he says the church, scholars call this the second advent. The second advent, whatever you want to call it, second advent, second coming, that's what these blood moons lead right straight into there. And as you will see as we go through his Bible, he stayed very consistent. I'll show you where these blood moons in his teaching is right prior to, immediately before Jesus' second coming. And if you're keeping score, if you're a Christian and you've lived through all the way up until his second coming, you've lived through billions of people on this planet dying, according to John Hagee. I don't believe any of this stuff, but this is John Hagee. I've spent years reading him. I know what I probably know his scheme, his eschatology better than he does. And so what we're going to do now is we get to go and look at a really neat graphic chart outlining this stuff. Just a couple of pages, probably 3 or 4 pages from those articles, you have this really neat, cool looking chart. He's got it all laid out here. As you can see over on the left side, the name of this chart is Prophecy Fulfilled, Christ to Eternity. Really neat stuff. It's all the way through to, the end of time, I guess, but I want to zoom in on a couple of sections that for our discussion are pertinent. Is look right here. And that little graphic right there, that's the church going up in his secret rapture, where they secretly just gets removed from the earth, get sucked off the earth. And if you follow the little yellow brick road through the tribulation, just up that little road, you'll see to the right of the rapture, the tribulation. And we're going to even move over and look at, and of course, he's told you that the church wouldn't go through any of this stuff. Keep in mind, he's saying that these moons next year are attached to Matthew 24:29, Mark 13:24. So these moons there and the astrological events that are outlined in Luke 21st chapter, that's all tied together with Joel 2, Acts 2. I didn't say it. I'm just, I'm agreeing with him. I'm just following. I've just moved over slightly to the right, close in on this the tribulation line. You see tribulation, Battle of Armageddon. two arrows that I have pointed right there. What are they at? He's saying that Matthew, right there in the tribulation, Matthew 24 verses 4 through 26 are part of the tribulation. The one that really ought to scare the crap out of any cornerstoners would be the one to the right over the second coming, right at the second coming. He's been very, very consistent right up until this blood moons deal that he's rolled out, that he's invented, that the rabbis, 4 rabbis, 3 rabbis have helped him come up with. But look at that second arrow to the right. Matthew 24, 27 through 30 is right at the second coming. Go look at Matthew 24, 29. That's your blood moon. That's your blood moon verses right there. So that's the point that I'm making through all of this stuff, is these moons that are going to take place, this astrological event. He ties this to not something that can be. There's not going to be any. If he's right now, there's not going to be any rapture. I never thought there was anyway, but he's led millions to believe this. So according to his own prophecy Bible right there, I'm not disagreeing with him. He's got the blood moon verses out of his spine of prophecy right there at the second coming, which you're going to see. This is not 10 years from now. This is right around 6 months from now. So as this video, by the time people watch this stuff, I guess you're going to be past the second coming. Okay, from that beautiful chart laying out the history of time, we're going to just flip over a couple of pages later to Roman numeral 34, and as you can see right here, this is a index. He calls this a master index to Bible prophecy. We're just going to focus on the section that he's got here, prophecies to be fulfilled after the rapture of the church. I want to, before I even show you the next page, the next shot, remember Matthew 24:29, he's taught that that's going to be something that you're going to see next year with these blood moons. He, even in his newest book, 4 blood moons, he uses Joel 2:30 and 31 as this same blood moons that's going to happen next year. He ties that to Acts 2, that blood moon. Okay, and also let me just remind folks that he's taught that the Gog-Magog war, which is tied to these moons, is something going to be happening as soon as 6 months from now, spanning over about 6 months period. So before we go to the next shot, I just wanted to, that's what we're going to look at, is a couple of his prophecies that, as you can see right here, this is under the heading of prophecies to be fulfilled after the rapture. So get a load of this. Okay, just like one page over on Roman numeral 36, you have this. I'm just going to let it sit there for just a second for all the Hagee folks, for it to just sit in. What it says clearly there that I've marked, I've drawn your attention to, is the Magog to attack Israel, Ezekiel 38:17 through 39:16. And right over here under the column, you can't see, if you go straight up from these columns, you have on the left side prophecy, you have on the right side is the fulfillment, and he says the Gog-Magog war is just before the middle of the tribulation, just before the middle of the tribulation, but yet he's started teaching that these blood moons that are attached to Joel 2, Acts 2, this is all happening starting in the next 6 months. And so is he going to admit that he's been wrong for 45 years? Of course not. He's just going to keep just flip everything upside down, and he's going to count on his folks in Cornerstone not being able to count. And to this day, I haven't heard him retract anything that he's taught for 40 years. So, but even at that, we got to go over to the same page. Just over in the next column, you have this gem. This is great. Yep, you have it. He has over in the very next column, and here again we're in the section of his index that these are things that's supposed to happen after the rapture. He has his coveted Joel 2:30 and 31 cataclysmic, cosmic events to occur. When does he have it occurring? In the Great Tribulation. And if you follow Hagee, he even separates the tribulation into tribulation and the Great Tribulation. And the Great Tribulation is the last half of the 7-year tribulation. So just for the fun of it, let's just jump over there, because this gets comical after a while. Let's just jump over real quick to his in the book of Joel, in this prophecy Bible, and look at these verses. And I think that this is interesting. And when we do flip right over there, I've got this all bracketed, underlined. This is his blood moon verse that he uses constantly. This is his centerpiece for the 4 blood moons book, his sermons. This Joel 2:30-31 is his centerpiece, and I want to draw your attention to the little note right there where I've got the arrow. What verse does he have? Yep, you've got it. Matthew 24:29, the same verse that he uses in here in the first 3 sermons, and then he uses it over in London. He ties the 24:29 to this Joel prophecy, Acts, Mark 13:24, and he has this. If you're just in case you're counting, he has this Joel prophecy being fulfilled in the Great Tribulation. The Great Tribulation. So, but we're not finished. We're just getting started. I'm going to try to blow through the rest of the stuff that I've got outlined in his prophecy Bible. We go over to the very next page. Here we go again. He has what I've put arrows to. He has Matthew 24:15, the Antichrist to institute false worship. Where does he have this being fulfilled? Look right next to this, the Great Tribulation. The next arrow there to the right, you have Matthew 24:21 and 22. This is all the Great Tribulation. The real kicker, the funny one, is look at the bottom left arrow. Matthew 24:27 through 30. Verse 29 is in the middle of that. That's his blood moon verses. And he has this. Look at what it says. This is at the second coming of Christ. Remember, you've got a secret rapture that's going to be it's going to be followed 7 years later by the second coming. And he has this blood moon occurrence that he says is going to start next year, tied to the Gog-Magog war next year. He's got it at the second coming. And so, you know, the thing about this is that he told us at the beginning of this video, he says, write about Matthew 24:14. Will you write the church raptured here? And I did it. I'll show you. I wonder how many Cornerstone folks have done just exactly what I've done. I've wrote in ballpoint pen, church raptured. Got arrows right there, right where John Hagee told his congregation to write it. It's written, but yet he's tying all this stuff next year to verses right below here. And while we're on it, let me just drop down about 4 inches below this verse and look at this gem. just right below this, you have at 27, 28, and 29, you have him putting, look at this header right there. He's broke in there and said, the second coming. Look what it says. His center, another one of his centerpieces, Matthew 24:29. Think about this. If you do nothing else, think about, this is this blood moon verse. It says, immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give up its light. This is his blood moon verse. And it says clearly that it's going to take place immediately after the tribulation of those days. What tribulation? Well, I would say that it's probably the abomination of desolation that happened up in verse 15 and all this other apocalyptic occurrences that have happened prior to. But here again, this 24:29, he's saying it's tied to the Gog-Magog war, and it's beginning next year, folks. He does this. This is the same blood moon. If you jump over to this is a synoptic gospel. You have basically the same thing in Mark, and you have Luke. Remember, he says it's at the second coming. Look at Mark's the notes that he's got for Mark, the same parallel to it. This is Mark 13:24. It is another one of his blood moon verses that he ties together. It says, verse 24, but in those days after that tribulation, the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give up its light. This is in his sermons here at the first of the year. He used this particular verse, Matthew 24:29. He tied those together. And look at the little heading right above my arrow. He has this at the second coming. The second coming. The second coming, cornerstoners, I don't know whether you realize it, but the second coming is at the very end of his 7-year tribulation. Again, let me just say again, I don't believe any of this stuff, but this is Hagee's system. This is Hagee's system, and hey, you know, but you jump over to Luke's account. Now, this is what he does now. When I read the new book that he just put out, he's pretty much dropped this Matthew and Mark. He went with the Luke account, thinking that I guess he figured out he messed up. He drops that and uses Luke. But when you look over at Luke account, let's go there. This is Luke's account. Look at what the heading says right beside my arrow. It says the second coming. What verses does he have right below the second coming? Matthew 24:29 through 31. Mark 13:24 through 27. You just saw those verses. He says these are the second coming, but now he's saying this is the blood moon. Verse 25, right below the arrow. And there will be signs in the sun, and in the moon, and in the stars, and on the earth distress of nation with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring. I mean, this is tied to Joel 2, Acts 2. This is, and it's the kicker of it is the billboard that you will see if you go back and look at his video. There's 4 blood moons, and there's a solar eclipse in the middle of them, and every one of these astrological occurrences have specific dates on it. So whenever he says, well, I'm not predicting the rapture could happen at any time. It could happen before this service is over. If I disappear, check your tube because I may be gone. The fact of the matter is if he dates something in the middle of the tribulation or later, he set dates, and that's exactly what he's done. Starting next year, these blood moons are tied to stuff that he has consistently for 40+ years said was at the end of his 7-year tribulation. So there's no place for a rapture. But what we're going to do is he's got a couple of more neat charts and admissions that I want to get to before we go on to and get into his new material. But because I just want to show you that he's consistently put all these things in the end of his 7-year tribulation. Okay, on this page, this is 1169 in the Hagee Bible. You have this neat graphic. Left side, this is a wide angle view, the rapture and the second coming. You can see the concept. You see the bunch of people getting sucked straight up. This is representative of the rapture. Of course, right here, and you see 7 years later, 7-year tribulation, you have the second coming. And right, I'm going to get a close-up of this on the other side. This right here is just a close-up shot of the same picture, the rapture and the second coming. What I want to draw your attention to is where I've got the arrow, signs will precede the second coming. He's got Matthew 24:24. It's the second coming. If we went back and looked at those that reference, that's the blood moon. Just 4 verses away from that is his blood moon verses. But if you flip over to his prophecy Bible, you look on page 1220, we have a gem also. As you can see, this little bitty chart, it's actually at the bottom of a page, a little vignette, little article that he's got in the book of Mark, right around the 13th chapter. This little article is called The Day and the Hour, and he's got this little chart at the bottom of it that says, look at the highlighted part at the top, signs of the second coming in Mark 13. And look at the very bottom, he's got verse 24, heavenly signs, sun and moon darkened, stars falling. There it is, the sun and the moon, the blood moon verses in Mark. He's clearly tying this to the second coming. Just look right up above that. It's like 3 lines above verse 14. Appearance of the abomination of desolation. Hello, you know, that's supposed to be the Antichrist. It's supposed to be come on the scene in the tribulation. If you go over, if we flip over just a couple of more pages, we have this. We have this neat chart right here, which, this is funny, this chart, it says the tribulation with all these neat things. You see the rapture of the church on the left, you see over here on the right, this is a wide angle. At the bottom, this is 7 years, you got all this detail. He has this not in the book of Revelations, this is in Matthew 24. Matthew 24 ends, or right after that chapter, he puts this chart, and he's got an article, or let me just get a close-up of the right side at right here. The arrow right there on the right side, it's the second coming. I mean, if you go through all of this, if you happen to make it all the way through this 7 years according to John Hagee's teaching, and you see this second coming, you've lived through the bowls, the trumpets, the vials, the seals, all this devastation. And he teaches that billions, not millions, but billions of people are going to die during this time. But yet he attaches this blood moon from Matthew 24:29 to this. It's right there at the second coming. On the very page, the adjacent page, I want to show you what he has about Matthew 24, which is his spine of prophecy. He says that the church would be raptured in 24:14, but yet you're going to see 24:19. You try to figure that one out. But look at this little nugget on the other page. First of all, before I even read this, I'm going to read this about a paragraph here for the faint-hearted, because I'm sure if there's any Cornerstone church members watching this video, they're going to be a little weak in the knees at this point. But I just want to point out, I didn't write this stuff. John Hagee's the one that lays all this stuff out, and he's the one, no one held a gun to his head and make him say that Matthew 24:29, the blood moons, and Mark 13:24, those blood moons, and Joel 2 and Acts 2, all that ties together and starts next year. It starts in about 6 months. You only have a small time frame. And remember, you go back to Matthew 24:29, it says immediately after the tribulation of those days the sun will turn to darkness, and I think that's how it goes. In other words, all of this devastation from John Hagee's 7-year tribulation has already taken place when the moons turn to blood. But look at this, look right here. It says, in Matthew 24, Jesus gives his description of the tribulation. In verses 4 through 8, he describes the events in the first half of the period, and in verse 9 through 14, the last half. Hold up, time out. He said to write in my Bibles that at 14 the church was being raptured out. Now he's saying here in his Bible, his prophecy Bible, that this is the last half of the tribulation. I go on. It says in verse 21 and 22, he makes the bone-chilling statement, for then will be great tribulation such as not seen since the beginning of the world until this time, no, nor ever shall be, unless those days were shortened, no flesh would be saved. Remember, folks, if you're seeing the blood moons that he's talking about, you're still here during this time. Goes on. John says in Revelation that the great day of his wrath is come, 6:17. He refers to the winepress of wrath of God, and the winepress of wrath of God. 14:10-19. Check this out. Vials of wrath of God will be poured out on the earth. 15:7, 16:1. Check this out. So if you think you're going to get sucked off the earth, Hagee's told you, and if he's telling you the truth now with these blood moons, how many people will escape? Hagee says no one will escape the wrath of God's tribulation. That's if he's right now. You're going to have to choose, but the point is, and I'm going to put this to bed, his Bible, is that, like I said, he's the one tying all this stuff together. This is from the first service, the first sermon he gave on the blood moons, and this is what he's going to be talking about is the spine of prophecy, and he's going to be talking about Matthew 24, which is, if you listen to me, Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 21. That's what he's calling the spine of prophecy. So, with the first clip, I am going to get this first one right, and the rest of them I might mess them all up. So here it is.
In Matthew 24, Jesus Christ gave a spine of prophecy. Everything that is going to happen from that moment that he was on the Mount on the Mount of Olives with his 12 disciples, and what's going to happen from then until the moment he comes the second time, puts his foot on that mountain, it will split in half. He will walk across the Kidron Valley inside the eastern gates of Jerusalem and set up his throne on the Temple Mount. I'm saying this, Jesus Christ is literally coming back. He's literally going to rule and reign from the city of Jerusalem for 1,000 years. And of that kingdom there shall be no end. You and I are part of that kingdom. Right now it looks like we're on the losing end of the fight. But brother, when the King of Kings comes back to earth, we are going to be victorious over the world, the flesh, and the devil. Give the Lord praise in the house of God.
All right, that was very simple. I didn't mess that one up. And all I wanted to do is point out in that first sermon that he very much views the Olivet Discourse, Matthew 24, which he's also going to refer to the counterpart in Mark 13. This is John Hagee's
spine. This is the backbone of his eschatology. And I believe he proves that. He's proved that over the last 40 years. But in the second sermon, he elaborates even more, just a little bit to, and I wanted to bring that out. These two clips from two different services, this is what he says about his spine of prophecy in the second service.
We begin now at Matthew 24. Read with me, if you will, please, verse 3. Now as he sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, saying, Tell us, when will these things be? What will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? The disciples are asking Jesus three questions. We'll deal with two of them. What is the sign of your coming, and what will be the sign of the end of the age? Jesus was going to die 3 days later. The disciples were just now catching on to the fact there was not going to be an earthly kingdom over which they would rule. Jesus is having his only prophecy seminar in Matthew 24. He begins by giving 12 general signs that will happen to every generation. And then he begins with the abomination of desolation that are specific prophetic questions that will happen as we come close to the coming of the Lord. This is what I call the spine of prophecy. It is exactly in precision to what has happened and is happening in the world. The disciples asked these questions in the exact order of the events that will happen. First, Christ will come, and then will come judgment. Jesus described the sign. The sun will be darkened. That means eclipsed. And the moon will not give its light. That's Matthew 24:29. The text that I read last night, Joel 2 and 3, the sun shall be turned to darkness and the moon to blood before the great and awesome day of the Lord. Acts 2 and 20 repeats exactly those words from the mouth of St. Peter. Isaiah 13:10, Isaiah said, the sun shall be darkened in its going forth, and the moon will not cause its light to shine. The fact is, the Bible clearly confirms the 4 blood moons that we have been talking about. NASA has confirmed that they are coming, and when. I'll go slowly and just review for just a moment that
all right, what you actually just got through listening to is two clips from the London service back in May or June of 2013. And of course, what I wanted to throw up there is I wanted to throw up there the actual billboard, the graphic that he displays right behind him, both in San Antonio, the 3 services here back in 2012 in December, and then also over in London. But right now, with enough said, I'm going to play a couple of clips from the first 2 services that he over here whenever he gave this sermon back in December of 2012, where he first rolled this out, where he references Matthew 24:29, and also one of those clips you'll hear Mark 13:24. And just keep in mind all that I went through in this first part of this video, and I'll be right back.
As creator, he has absolute control of the sun, the moon, and the stars. Genesis 1:14, the Bible says, Then God said, Let there be lights in the firmament of the heavens to divide the day from the night. Listen closely. And let them be for signs and seasons and for days and years. The Hebrew word for signs also means signal. So let them be for signals. The heavens are God's billboard, and when something big is about to happen, He gives planet Earth a sign in heaven. It's a signal that something significant is about to happen. Pay attention. NASA has said this is coming. God has said through Joel and St. Peter, listen, when this happens, it's unusual. Jesus said in Mark 13:24-26, but in those days the sun shall be darkened, and the moon shall not give its light. Then they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. That verse describes a time in the future when the sun and the moon will eclipse at the same time. And God sends planet Earth a signal that something big is about to happen. Rabbinical scholars state that when the sun is eclipsed, like this picture, it means the judgment of God is coming to nations. When the moon is eclipsed, it is a sign of God's judgment on the enemies of Israel. When the sun is eclipsed in the center of 4 blood moons, as is this chart, it is the warning to the whole world that something devastating is going to happen. This is an enormous message. Did Jesus say anything about this? Yes. Jesus said in Mark 13:14-26, but in the last days of the dispensation of grace, please hear me, the world is never going to end. People who say that are biblically illiterate. At the end of the dispensation of grace, the sun is going to be darkened, eclipsed, and the moon will not give its light. Mark 13:24, the stars of the heaven will fall. The sign Jesus gave us to be concerned about his return. He said in Matthew 24:29, immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun shall be darkened, solar eclipse, and the moon will not give its light, a blood moon. And then the sign of the Son of Man, Jesus, will appear in heaven, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. That's a description of the second coming. Consider the 4 blood moons. I've given it to you in Joel 2, verses 30-31. I've given it to you again in Acts 2, verses 19-20. This is not a fabrication. This is written in the Word of God. NASA is now saying this is going to happen starting in April 2014. God has made it very clear that at some point in the future, He's going to cause the moon to turn to blood and the sun not to give its light. This is God's signal to this terminal generation that something is big and it's going to happen soon. And that something...
Okay, I'm not going to waste really very much time at all. You've seen it. You've seen the last probably 10 minutes of clips from his new blood moon, and you've heard his London spiel. As you can see, this is the graphic that he kept pointing to right there at the end. He was saying this. He was pointing at this sign, this big billboard, and look at the specific dates. This is what he says it's going to happen next year. I'm not disputing that it's going to happen. He says that this is the Gog-Magog war. And by the way, I didn't spend a whole lot. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time making that connection in this video. If you want to see one of my other 3 videos, I would and you want to see a lot about how he connects the Gog-Magog war with this, just go to Google or YouTube video and do a search. Put Ron Hall in there, blood red moons, or 4 coming blood moons. My stuff will come up. Look for the video that's 109 minutes long. That one right there, I give you about 6 places where pulled from his sermons where he flat out says that the Gog-Magog war would happen 3.5 years after the rapture of the church. One of them, you've got Jerry Falwell sitting on the stage just off to his right. But yet, if you listen to the sermons that he preached in San Antonio back at the beginning of this year or the end of last year, he says that these moons that are happening next year are the Gog-Magog war. But I'm not going to say anything more about that. right now what we're going to do is we're going to switch gears. We're going to go and spend a little time in his brand spanking new book. As you can see right there, it looks a lot like the graphic behind it. You get the same same dates setting in the book, and I'm not going to waste any more time. We're going to jump right to it. Okay, I realize that at this point this is probably considered overkill, but I couldn't help but pull out a few of these clips from his book. And one thing that I wanted to say before I ever even addressed any of the specific points, I just want the table of contents, he's broke it into 3 sections. And which is the signs of heaven. The second section is the spine of prophecy, and the third section is the 4 blood moons. Most of the stuff that I'm going to be referring to comes out of that middle section, his spine of prophecy that he referred to earlier in the videos that I played. Instead of going like in chronological order, I'm going to jump to, if you get his book, and I encourage you to do that, get John Hagee's book. It's very affordable. I think that I paid like $8 for it. It comes straight out in paperback. Got it for $8. Get it, read it, and all you have to do is read this thing and keep in mind that everything that I've showed you, what he's taught over the last 40 years, dealing with these specific verses like Joel and Acts and the Olivet Discourse, Matthew 24:29, Mark 13:24, and Luke 21:25. What he's always taught about where the Gog-Magog war would be, and where that would fit into his end times paradigm. What I want to do now is just jump over to page 163. That's what you're looking at right now. This page 163, and what it is, it's just, I want to draw your attention to the heading. It says the second coming. He gives Matthew 24:30. He's saying that is very consistent with what he has taught for 40 years. That you can even see in all the stuff that I showed you at the start of it. And I wanted to read about a paragraph or so, because right under that heading he writes this: Jesus Christ is coming back the second time to a world living in unspeakable terror of the great tribulation. People are looking for any glimmer of hope. They are even following false prophets in search of their redemption. In desperation, they will believe and spread false reports saying, "Look, he is in the desert," or "Look, he is in the inner room." He puts Matthew 24:26. Keep in mind of what I showed you at the first part of this video, that he said that the church would be raptured, at Matthew 24:14. He's kind of been vague about that, but certainly all of this stuff in Matthew, most of it, he has always taught that the church would be in heaven. I go on to the next paragraph. During this time, the false prophet of the Antichrist will be performing miracles, and because of them, deception will be rampant, to deceive, if possible, even the elect. He's got a note there, verse 24. He's referring to 24:24. I go on. Christ warns his generation and those generations to come. Do not believe it. He's got verse 26. The rabbi describes his second coming not as someone in the desert, but as lightning comes from the east and flashes to the west. Verse 27. I believe Jesus will appear the first in Jerusalem, the east, and the radiance will reach the west as the sun shining out full strength. So far he's kind of systematically went through Matthew 24. He goes on, the last paragraph I'm going to read. The second coming of Christ will cause all the tribes of the earth to mourn. Verse 30. Why? The vast majority of the people who do not take the mark of the beast will be killed by the Antichrist, and many of the people who remain will be demonized disciples of the Prince of Darkness. What I wanted to draw your attention to is the fact that he jumped straight over one of his main blood moon verses. He could have easily put verse 29 in there, but he jumped right over that. And there's a reason I believe he does that. It's because I mean, if you just think about this, this is just I mean, what if he would have read that verse? He would have read this. I'm going to read his main verse, one of his main verses, Matthew 24:29. It reads this way out of his prophecy Bible. It says, immediately after the tribulation of those days. Let me say that again. Jesus just laid out all this tribulation, the abomination of desolation, all of this carnage, stuff that John Hagee's described, where there's 2 billion people gonna die during this time. And one of his main verses is this, Matthew 24:29. And here again, it reads this way: immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give up its light. The stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of heaven will be shaken. In other words, John Hagee uses this verse, and he says this happens next year. You could, if you count on John Hagee, if you trust him, you could actually say immediately after the tribulation of those days, it's going to be 2014 and 2015. The sun will be darkened. He turned right around a while ago and pointed to that board with the moons on it. It's not vague. Every one of those moons in the sun have specific dates underneath it. He says that this is the fulfillment. And that's why I wanted to start off with that, and also draw your attention to the background that I had earlier. I'm going to throw it up. See this? This is, he's got, look right there at the second arrow again. He's got Matthew 24:27 through 30. That means 27, 28, 29, and 30. His verse 29 is at the second coming. Okay, so that's why I felt, comfortable with sticking his blood moon, that little graphic, right over top of the second coming, which, if you're a Cornerstone church member, and he's telling you that you will see this in less than 6 months, then he's telling you you're going to see the second coming of Jesus Christ. And if you just follow the little yellow brick road backwards, you'll actually have possibly lived past the Battle of Armageddon, which also certainly the Gog-Magog war. So, you've got, let's see, John said that about a quarter of the people on earth is going to die during a Holocaust. So I would say that, his church members got a 1 out of 4 chance of surviving. I didn't say this again. This is John's own system. I'm just showing you. I would like to know which one's right. I'm not disagreeing with him. I'm just wondering if there's going to be a rapture. How's that going to happen, and cram 7-year tribulation into right now and the second coming of Christ that it's going to come next year, or it could come in that span of 2014, 2015, according to John. But I want to jump over to earlier in the book, earlier to page 97 now, and I'm going to try to or 96 and 97. Okay, actually what you're looking at right here is from page 97, and this is in his chapter, I think it's chapter 6. It's chapter 6, and the name of that chapter is concerning the rapture, and this is in his spine of prophecy section. And I just want to back up to just a page prior to that, and I want to read about a page because this is almost comical. Knowing what you know now about Joel chapter 2 verse 30 and 31, and Acts 2 verse 20 and 21, and the Olivet Discourse, you should be an expert by now, but I'm going to start with the very bottom of page 96. It's under a section it's called Deception in the Church. Okay, he goes like this. Paul writes the following to believers in Thessalonica, and he actually put in here 2 Thessalonians 2, 1 through 5, which I'm going to go ahead and read. It's not that much. Now we request you, brethren, with regard to the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ and our gathering together to him, that you not be quickly shaken from your composure, or be disturbed either by spirit or a message or a letter as if from us, to the effect that the day of the Lord has come. Let no one in any way deceive you, for it will not come unless apostasy comes first, and that man of lawlessness is revealed, the son of destruction, who opposes and exalts himself above every so-called God or object of worship, so that he takes his seat in the temple of God, displaying himself as being God. Do you not remember that while I was still with you, I was telling you these things? 2 Thessalonians 2, 1 through 5, and that's in the NASB translation. Now, that's where he stopped the scripture. Now I'm going to go on with his brief but very powerful notes right after that in the book. He says this, John Hagee says, the day of the Lord, he's got that in quotation, quote unquote, the day of the Lord in this verse has nothing. You see that right there displayed. You can see I've got it underlined right there. The day of the Lord in this verse has nothing to do with the church. It has to do with a day of God's judgment on the earth that occurs after the rapture, beginning with the Great Tribulation and going through the millennium. Okay, so John's saying right there that this day of the Lord has nothing to do with the church, so it couldn't have anything to do with the rapture. That's what John's saying, clear as mud. Okay, I go on. Apparently, John says, someone in the first century church had fabricated a letter from us, meaning Paul, Timothy, or Silas, and was deceiving the Christians at Thessalonica, leading them to believe they were in the Great Tribulation. Because of the persecution of the church was experienced at the time, it was a distortion of the truth that was easily believed. Paul writes his letter to the believers in the church of Thessalonica, and now you see the very next page, that the counterfeit letter and its message were false. Look what I've drawn you. This is what John writes. I didn't make him write this. He writes this. I put an arrow by it. He didn't put the arrow. As I have stated before, Joel describes the actual coming of the day of the Lord, and then he gives right there his centerpiece. This is the foundation for his blood moon scheme, is this scripture passage, Joel 2, 30 through 31. He is telling you exactly that these moons next year, according to what he's saying right here, he's saying it's the second coming. Right there it says, and I will show you wonders in heavens and earth, blood and fire and pillars of smoke. The sun will be turned to darkness and the moon into blood before the coming great and awesome day of the Lord. Here again, if we trust John, okay, if we trust his judgment and that he's right on this blood moon new discovery that he's made, we could actually put he puts the dates on the board, right? He puts the date on the board, he points over and over, and he says that this is Joel 2:30 through 31. He says this is Matthew 24:29, correct? So you could even say right now, if you read this, Joel, you could go ahead and mark dates in there, because John says it. You could say, and I will show you wonders in heavens and earth, blood and fire and pillars of smoke. The sun will be turned into darkness in 2014, 2015, and the moon will turn to blood before the great and awesome day of the Lord. The second coming is next year according to John. So here again, how are you going to cram the rapture sometime between now and next year? The rapture's got to take in, plus you've got to cram 7 years into between now and the second coming that that John Hagee is saying is happening next year. Okay, I mean, I go on. I'm gonna jump over now to another section. It's in over earlier in the book. It's on page 18 and 19. And here again, I encourage you to buy his book, go through it, and just use common sense. Okay, what you're looking at right now is actually from page 19, earlier section in the book, but I actually want to back up and read half the page 18. And he had, prior to this, he just got into the talking about the difference between astrology and astronomy, and he went on giving you a little science and yada yada yada. And then he about middle ways through page 18, he says, in this book our discussion of the stars and moon in biblical prophecy is based on the Word of God, history, and the science of astronomy, and never refers to astrology. He just wants to distance himself from astrology whatsoever. Now, going on, we get into the section that I want to discuss right here and just point out to you, buy the book, you look at it for yourself. This is on page 18. This is in a section, it says God's High Definition Billboard. And John Hagee writes, as I thought about the sun, moon, and the stars as sources of prophetic direction, I considered the words of Joel 2:30 through 31. And he quotes that, and I'm going to give it to you again. I will show wonders in heavens and earth, blood and fire and pillars of smoke. The sun shall be turned into darkness and the moon into blood before the coming great and awesome day of the Lord. And he puts in italics for emphasis purposes, I'm sure he puts before the coming. He wants to emphasize before the coming. And then he goes on, I remembered that the Apostle Peter on the day of Pentecost made nearly exactly the same remarks as recorded in Acts 2:19 through 20. And I'm going to read that quote. It's from Peter, or the book of Acts. He says, I will show wonders in heaven above and signs in the earth beneath, blood and fire and vapor of smoke. The sun shall be turned into darkness and the moon into blood before, and he's got that in italics, before the coming great and awesome day of the Lord. Okay, this is his centerpiece. Let me remind you, when you go back to his Prophecy Bible, which I rewind this, go back to the beginning of this video, he has historically put Joel chapter 2 verse 30 and 31 in the middle of the tribulation. Okay, and I wanted to let you know that he puts before the coming of the Lord, before the second coming is what John's pointing out here. You're going to see the blood moons. And I'm sure that's probably, he's wanting to draw I assume, make the emphasis that there's going to be some split second period of time between the blood moons that he keeps pointing at and the second coming. And I want to point out to you that John has historically said that Joel 2, chapter 2, verse 30 and 31 is a tribulation mid-trib. And also, I want to draw your attention to the fact that if you watch all these videos, there's 3 sections that he preached here in San Antonio. Watch all 3 of them. It's about 2 hours. It'll be worth it. He gets into a lot of the intricacies and the carnage and the terror that he sees coming in this upcoming war led by Russia and Iran, and Germany is going to be part of this, Turkey, Egypt, Libya, all this stuff. He says the Gog-Magog war is this blood moon occurrence happening next year is the Gog-Magog war. So here again he can say before the coming of the day of the Lord, put it in italics, he still attaches those blood moons to Joel 2, 30 through 31. He still attaches those blood moons to the Olivet Discourse in Matthew, in Luke, in Mark, that astrological occurrence there, and he says the Gog-Magog war is happening next year. So he's done away. There's not going to be, according to what he's saying right now, the rapture is gone. It's eliminated. Don't count on it. I would just, you maybe build a bomb shelter. If John's right, get some iodine pills. I don't know, what would you do if you knew that 2 or 3 billion people were going to die on this planet. You certainly want to take precautions and go to Walmart and Kmart and get some of the water and stuff. I'm being facetious, but I go on. I wanted to move on to what you see right there on the next page. I wanted to move on with this section because it's very good. He goes on after quoting Acts. He says, what does moon into blood, quote unquote, refer to in these verses? I learned later in my research that this astrological event is actually called a blood moon. A blood moon occurs during a total lunar eclipse. The moon does not actually turn to blood, duh, but it does appear blood red. Look what I've drawn your attention to. I've arrowed it, I've underlined it, I've done everything I can do. He says, if we are going to see these wonders in the heavens before the coming of the Lord, how long before his coming will we see them? The Bible gives no answer other than the words of Jesus to his disciples, and he quotes Matthew 24:36, which you should have been gone, Cornerstone Church, in Matthew 24:14 or earlier. He says, of that day and hour no one knows, not even angels in heaven, but my Father only. And I'm about to come into, he moves on right there. Jesus said, there will be signs in the sun and the moon and the stars. He's got ellipses. When these things begin to happen, look up and lift up your heads, because your redemption draws near. Luke 21:25 through 28. See how he's just switched. He didn't want to. He could have easily give you Matthew 20. He could have stayed with Matthew. He started with Matthew. He jumps to Luke. Why is that? Is because he would have to say, if he would have stayed with Luke's occurrence of it, he would have had to say again this. He would have had to say, immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give up its light. He would have had to draw even more attention to the fact that immediately after the tribulation of those days, which some of that tribulation is the abomination of desolation, earthquakes and famines and pestilence and war, all that stuff that took place before 24, 29. So what he does is he gets around that by just switching to Luke, and he doesn't have to deal with immediately. I go on. In the prophetic words Jesus spoke to his disciples on Mount of Olives, he stated, and here it is. He does use the verse here, as you can see right there. Immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, solar eclipse, and the moon will not give up its light, lunar eclipse. The stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of heaven will be shaken. Nuclear war. Okay, so then after the signs of the heaven, the Son of Man will appear in heaven. So, I mean, if you're keeping score, he just says in plain black and white, you can see it there. He's saying Matthew 24, 29 and 30, the blood moon verses that he's pointing at, he's saying that there's nuclear war possibly. Well, I would say, yeah. I mean, there's going to be 2 billion people killed in the next two years or so, according to John Hagee. No chance of a rapture. Kiss that one goodbye. So here again, we're probably going to want to do some hunkering down. At this point, we're going to jump over to page 39 and 40. Great stuff. I started off with a bunch of stuff, and I've chiseled it down to just 6 things that I wanted to talk about. Okay, next what we're going to do is we're going to jump over to page 39 and 40, and we're in a section, this is in the chapter The Star in the East, and we're in a section where it's headed, the name of it, Signs in the Sun and the Moon and the Stars. And I wanted to read, that's what you're looking at right here, and I wanted to read down to that first arrow there, what he's got, Matthew 24, his spine of prophecy. Just a little bit, we have established that God the Father spoke through the prophets using the sun, moon, and the stars. He then sent his Son on an earthly mission to speak of things to come. Did Jesus speak of signs in the heaven and on earth? Absolutely, John says, John Hagee. He goes on, when the disciples came to Jesus on the Mount of Olives and asked him, what will be the signs of your coming and the end of the age? He did not rebuke them, but he answered them by encouraging them to look for signs on the earth and in the heavens, and that's what you see, that first arrow there, Matthew 24. I want you to pay very close attention to that. The very next verse, now he starts outlining a bunch of the tribulation here, and I want you to just think through this because it's not rocket science. John Hagee says, Jesus told them to beware of deceptions which would be followed by wars and rumors of wars, famines, pestilence, earthquakes, the attack on Jerusalem by the Romans, and the great tribulation such as not been seen since the beginning of the world until this time. And he's got there in brackets, could this be the Holocaust? He's got verse 21. He goes on, he said that unless those days were shortened, no flesh would be saved. But for the elect's sake, the Jewish people, those days will be shortened. Look at the tribulation, the stuff that he just outlined. I mean, he could have put in there the abomination of desolation, because what he's doing is he's forming a list based on everything from 15 all the way up. He's got reference there with the second arrow. That's verse 21 in Matthew, 24:21, and the last one at the bottom of the page is Matthew 24:22. And he says Jesus told them to beware of deceptions which would be followed by wars, rumors of war, famine, pestilence. This is the list of stuff that's earlier in Matthew 24, but he stops just prior to. Just think if we pulled his verse out right now, and which I'm going to do. This is out of John Hagee's Prophecy Bible. Matthew 24:29. It reads as this way. Immediately after, okay? Immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give up its light. The stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of heaven be shaken. The reason I keep emphasizing that is the very list that John Hagee is putting right there, the pestilence and the wars and the famines and all this stuff, the great trib. He's saying this is stuff that's going to happen before the moons that are coming next year. But I flip over to the next page, and the page 40, and you'll be looking, as you see right here, he goes on and he says, Jesus continued in Matthew 24:33. See how he just skipped over 24:29? He says, when you see all these things, these physical signs, know that it is your redemption, according to Luke 21:28, is near at the door. He goes on, Jesus ended his teaching session with his disciples by warning all generations not to attempt to set an exact date in which he would return, Matthew 24:36. Although John sets very specific dates on when the Gog-Magog war is going to happen, when Joel 2:30 through 31 is going to happen. But go on. Although Jesus warned us, okay, look what he says. Yeah, I've got it underlined there. Although Jesus warned us about setting a specific date, he did tell us to watch for signs of his coming. He not only gave his 12 disciples the prophecy of Matthew 24, but also he told them there will be signs in the sun, in the moon, and in the stars. Okay, that is the same occurrence as in Matthew 24:29. That blood moon occurrence is going to be after all the list of stuff that comes earlier in that chapter. The abomination of desolation, the wars and the pestilence. Or else it would have said, it wouldn't have said immediately after the tribulation of those days. But what's neat is when you go right down lower on that page, and I'm going to draw this one to a close, he's got, and you're looking at it here, he's got Eureka. Though I had applied the study of the stars relative to the creation of the birth of Christ, I had yet to discover the connection that Pastor Mark, and he's talking about Mark Biltz, had asked me to make. How were the sun, moon, stars linked to the study of prophecy? I searched the scriptures for a new revelation with that specific question in mind, and came to two verses that shouted at me. What are those verses that shouted at him? Right down there, you would read, the sun will be turned into darkness and the moon to blood before the coming great dreadful day of the Lord, Joel 2:31. And on the next page, the sun will be turned to darkness and moon to blood before the coming and great glorious day of the Lord, Acts 2:20. Along with his Eureka moment, I wonder if he said, Eureka, this is it. This is the blood moon, and Eureka, I have been wrong for 40 years, because he's put that in the Great Tribulation. All right, we got two more. We're going to move right quickly. We're going to move over to page 157. And okay, we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on this one. This is on, like I said, page 157, down towards the bottom in a section that says lightning from the east. It says right here, now pay close attention to this. It says, when Jesus came to earth the first time in Bethlehem, only Mary and Joseph and a handful of shepherds gathered at the manger for the birth of God's Son. When Jesus comes the second time, and I've got that underlined, as described in Revelation 19:11 and 16, the whole world will see him. The Bible reads right here, look what he's quoting Matthew 24:27. This is prior to 24:29. It says, as lightning comes from the east and flashes to the west, so also will the coming of the Son of Man be. You know, here again, everything, all the tribulation of those days that are outlined in Matthew 24:15 all the way up to 24:28. That's going to happen. All that stuff is going to happen prior to the blood moons, according to John Hagee now. I'm not disagreeing with him. I just wonder whether he's right now and he's been wrong for 40 years, or is he just off the wall with all this stuff? Because if he's right now, the rapture, like I've said, there's no possible way that there's no point in a rapture, because it's literally right at the end of the 7-year tribulation. But the last one I wanted to flip to and comment on before I wind this section up is over on page 161. Okay, and before I even get to 161, I kind of need to set this up. Over on 159, he starts into the section Israel's Israel's tormentors, and he leads up to this 161. But at the top of 159, he writes this under Israel's tormentors. I believe there's a mystery verse in the Olivet Discourse that contains a hidden yet obvious meaning about all the nations that have or will torment the Jewish people and threaten to bring destruction against the land of Israel, the land of God's promise. We read, and he gives the verse. He gives Matthew 24:28, and it's simply this: wherever the carcass is, there the eagles will be gathered together. Now, I'm not going to I'm to paraphrase the next 2 pages. He basically, this is where he gets into the Gog-Magog war, and he gets into, he makes the case that one of the countries that are going to be part of this Gog-Magog war here in just starting in about 6 months to a year is going to be Germany. That's whenever he flips, and where he's always he's historically taught that he ties Germany to Gomer from Ezekiel, which he comes up with this whole elaborate thing that it's Germany, but yet he's always taught that that's a country, it's a location in Turkey. He just ignores that because evidently there's something cooking with Germany that's coming down the pike. You know, at least I guess God's telling John Hagee this stuff. But keep in mind, this is Matthew 24:28, and so he goes into this 2 pages, and so that's where I want to jump to and finish up. And like I said, I could have spent I had 25 places in this book to where I had to like limit it, and I limited it. I could have went on, and I encourage you. I'm not trying to get people not to buy this book. Buy it. It's very cheap. It's a beautiful cover. Read it with all these verses and the knowledge of how he's taught for the last 40 years. Read it with that in mind now. But the top of page 161, he has this. And you're looking at that right there. The obvious meaning of Matthew 24:28 is revealed in Revelation 19, chapter 19, 17 through 21, when God himself is going to invite the birds of the earth to eat the dead flesh of those who have attacked Israel. The Bible describes the scene very graphically. Now I want to just call a timeout, if I've got any timeouts left. What has he just done? Think about it. He says that you're going to see 24:29, correct? He says that's going to be these moons that start next year. But he's saying this 24:28 is, he's attaching this to Revelation 19 verses 17 through 21. Common sense says right there that these blood moons are deep into his 7-year tribulation. Like I said, this is not rocket science. So, okay, before the blood moons happen in 24:29, we can expect, if John Hagee's correct, we can expect this next verse to play out here on the earth. And I guess this is part of the 2 billion that will be killed. It says, "Then I saw an angel standing in the sun, and he cried with a loud voice, saying to all the birds that fly in the midst of heaven, Come and gather together for the supper of the great God, that you may eat the flesh of kings, and flesh of captains, and flesh of mighty men, flesh of horses." I guess we're going to go back to riding horses, "and of those who sit on them, and the flesh of all the people, free and slave, both small and great, and all the birds were filled with their flesh." John attaches this to the hidden meaning in Matthew 24:28. So this, by just common sense, has to take place before Matthew 24:29, which, to stay consistent now, it does say in Matthew 24:29, immediately after the tribulation of those days. I guess this is some of the tribulation that's going to have to take place before the actual blood moons. I'm going to move on. As you can see, the nations that have touched the apple of God's eye and will attempt to torment them in the future will be utterly destroyed on the hills of Israel by the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It's going to happen, he says. Having told his, now get this, this is where I'm going to end. Having told his disciples of the great tribulation, Matthew 24:15 through 29. Okay? 15 through 29. 29 is the blood red moons that is happening next year. And he, by his own admission, is putting this in the great tribulation, thus eliminating totally any time period, no need for a rapture, which you know, the Hagee folks just need, like I said, to hunker down and get ready for the 2 billion plus that are going to die in the next few months, I guess. You know, let me back up and read that whole. Having told his disciples about the great tribulation, Matthew 24:15 through 29, the rabbi continues his Olivet discourse by describing the next major event in the prophetic digest of tomorrow's world. And then when you flip over there, that's the end of that chapter. This is where we started. The next one was at the second coming. So I'm going to end this book review right there. Buy the book. I think I paid like $8 for it. Please get it. I don't want to cost the John Hagee's ministry one dime. Please buy his book. I own 2 of his prophecy Bibles.
Okay, that concludes my coverage of John Hagee's Four Coming Blood Moons book. I could have spent a lot more time in it. At this point, I do not anticipate ever needing to visit this subject again. I think I pulled together everything that I wanted to in this video. As you can see behind me, I've put up to date John Hagee's chart based on his teaching now. And like I did earlier, I put the blood moon, his billboard, right there where he's putting it right now at the second coming. And I can even plug in the dates right underneath there because John Hagee does. You can follow this timeline down to the rapture here. And I still, in closing, I'm not going to spend any more time with this. You can make your own conclusion. He's completely destroyed any chance for a rapture. The rapture, you can kiss it goodbye if he's correct now, which I don't think he is. But I wanted to point out to people what he's done with his own eschatology. But let me point out that he makes, right here at the second coming, is his centerpiece for his blood moons. He attaches that to Joel chapter 2, verse 30 and 31. And also, as you can see right there where I've got the arrows pointing up here, he has another one of his centerpieces for his blood moon right at Matthew 24, 27 through 30, which here again, I'm going to end up with this right here. Verse 29 is right here. Okay, and I'm going to read right here in the closing of this video, Matthew 29 again. It says this. This is out of the John Hagee Prophecy Bible. It says this: immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give up its light. The stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of heaven will be shaken. Everything you see right down this timeline right here, this is the tribulation that is going to happen immediately before verse 29. Think about it. How can you work in a 7-year tribulation between a rapture and a 7-year tribulation in between now and next year? Next year, 2014 to 2015. You can't. You simply can't. So I think that if you want to view any of the rest of my videos that I've done, I've pretty much consolidated every one of my videos into this one, with the exception of if you want to really get into what he's taught about the Gog-Magog war, you can go to, I've got a couple of other videos that I specifically honed in on that part of it, because he spent so much time preparing people for this upcoming Middle Eastern war that he's drawn this picture of where Israel is going to have a preemptive strike on Iran to take out their missile, their nuclear capability of making nuclear weapons. He says that over and over, that Israel's going to have to go it alone. And that's whenever Russia and Iran, Turkey, Germany, I could spend a lot of time on that subject. Germany, Ethiopia, Libya, all these Arab countries with the exception of Germany, he brings them into the mix. They're going to come, it's going to result in this Gog-Magog war. What I do in those other videos is I pull out about 6 or 7 places where he covers that in the past, and he assures his flock that they would be gone 3.5 years before that happened. But yet now, the blood moons, he says this is the Gog-Magog war. So right down the timeline here, you got the Battle of Armageddon right there. So with that, I'm going to close this video. And if you want to see those other videos of mine, all you got to do is just go to YouTube in there in the search, you can just pop in there, Ron Hall, 4 coming blood moons. It brings up everything that I've put up on the net. And if you want to correspond with me, of course you can through YouTube, or you can drop me a line at onthewarningtrack@gmail.com. And you know, I'm interested in your feedback. Maybe somebody can mathematically show me how John Hagee has been right for 40 plus years and he's still right. How can that mathematically go together? So with that, I'm going to close. Thank you very much for staying with this rather lengthy video, but you know, this is, I think I presented a slam dunk, irrefutable case that John Hagee has totally flipped his eschatology upside down. As you can see, I never disagreed one iota with John Hagee. I just presented John Hagee and John Hagee. Will the real John Hagee please stand up?